refillable deodorant in itself doesn't sound like a bad idea because you've got the outside packaging. Then you're like, okay, well, I like my container. A refill is a good thing as long as I can get the smells I want at the price I want. Fine. Do you see where this is going? Packaging wise, it has to get to you somehow. So maybe that's not like a perfect system, but surely you save on the refill because you don't have to push it up, etc., etc. I'm getting too much into the detail of this. I was reticent to try it Wild to start with. I think I tried somewhere else's, maybe Lush's deodorant before that was refillable or at least more natural based. I can't remember when I had the scare about the aerosols. It was a combination of when you spray it, it gets everywhere. It's really cloying. And there was a load of marketing about whether the aluminium or something in it that blocks you from sweating is carcinogenic. So it goes straight into your pores and then very close to certain female areas that have had cancer rates on the rise. So I thought maybe it's a good idea to not use that and aerosols because the ozone layer. We don't really talk about that anymore, do we? Because the hole's kind of closing up, I think. That's good. That was a win. Let me know if I'm wrong on that one. I thought we were okay now for that. The NC is being reduced. Anyway, I tried Wild and I was surprised. It did take a little bit of time to bed in because my pits were like, no, we're free again. But relatively soon, I stopped being a pong fest and I just went on my way. Favourite scent, jasmine and mandarin blossom, by the way. And once again, I've been disappointed by capitalism. So what happened? Well, shrinkflation, they changed their packaging. It was a lot slimmer. You had less in it. And also I had a great way of getting the remnants of the old deodorant out. You just kind of flip it over and then scrape it onto the new one. It wasn't a problem for me. That wasn't a concern. Then they put the prices up and that was quite expensive. So like a $5 plus for a refill feels a bit extortionate. That's more than I would be paying for like a £2 bottle of aerosol. Maybe it's even £3 now. It just feels disproportionate. And yeah, you pay to try to be a little bit more natural, but should you be taxed on it? Are the ingredients that much different or are you actually paying for greenwashing? My metallic-y case was also flaking a little bit. It's not a massive issue. It didn't affect anything in terms of the actual usage of it. It just looks a little bit tired, much like me. But the nail in Wild's coffin for me was they sold to Unilever. Unilever, historically, though I am told by AI that it is no longer an issue, or at least it's a very small part of their portfolio, they don't do animal testing. A very brief overview from my understanding is that Unilever sells products into China. China used to have this blanket rule whereby you couldn't have products for humans that were not tested on animals for safety. Now, obviously, there's a load of issues with that, both ethically and also because humans and animals genetically not interchangeable, but that's by the by. That was the rule. Apparently that's been relaxed a little bit if you can show different ways of something or other. I did not know the nuance, but I've very much been conditioned that with the Unilever happy brand on it, not necessarily the Unilever happy reality. So with all of these factors in the background and nothing to recommend them, I also don't like the marketing whereby they're like, oh, we've got a new case out. The whole point is that it's a refillable and maybe have like jackets instead of the outside full case because then I've just got a load of plastic cases on my shelf. That is the whole freaking point of this deodorant. Anyway, so I got peed off and started looking into the economics of making my own deodorant, and I think I'd maybe also tried this before. I have a feeling that we ran out of Wild refills in Mexico. I think I bought a load of coconut oil and then tried to use that, and that did not work by itself. It doesn't work, or at least on my pits. That probably didn't help the whole situation, just smell of sweat and coconut oil. Long story short, I was able to isolate a recipe apart from I couldn't find this lemon ricinoleate stuff. You can only buy it in massive bulk from slightly badly rated suppliers. So I was like, leave that one for now. Apparently the point of that one is that it blocks any sweat that does go through the rest of it. It stops it from being stanky. But what I found particularly interesting was that the ingredients I bought, and I did drop 70 quid on this, so it wasn't cheap. It was not a cheap endeavour. But I could make a deodorant for a couple of quid. And I am not a bulk purchaser. I bought ingredients for the amount of maybe 50 deodorants in total for some of them because, you know, magnesium and stuff, you only use a tiny bit. But I should not be easily able to spend, if I'd bought the ricinoleate or however it's pronounced, I should not be able to spend £100 on ingredients and then just be able to whack out deodorants for a bar cost of less than I can purchase it. I know I need to pay for advertising and other overheads, that's fine, but the offset of the fact that you can buy stupid amounts of bulk ingredients and manufacture it in a place that probably has low labour costs means that I should not be anywhere near it. If you're expecting me to pay that much for a deodorant, it's ridiculous. A long time ago, I made soap, and that's quite fun to do. It's also really dodgy, like you have to have proper PPE and like a whole separate set of stuff to make it in because you can't use kitchen stuff. However, that box is deeply buried in the garage, so I had to use kitchen stuff for this because the ingredients are basically butters and oils and stuff and baking powder. None of it was particularly offensive. Ideally, I would have had a separate set, but that didn't happen. I wasn't concerned because it wasn't soap. It's fine. It's going on with pits. It's, you know, pretty skin safe. And that doesn't necessarily mean that things that are skin safe as you're making them, but it was relatively low risk. Apparently, if I'd added essential oils, which I didn't, I chose not to for this one. I wanted to test the actual formula instead of adding essential oils and trying to, you know, prettify it, make it the perfect thing immediately. Obviously, I like doing the perfect thing immediately because that is very much within my skill set. But that was not the goal. I was very low on deodorant, so I needed to just wax them out and not worry about how the essential oils would be interfering with my formulation. Apparently, the fact that I didn't do that was really good because the most risky ingredient was the essential oils. I don't really factor in when I'm doing things, but apparently that is the most risky part because they're concentrated chemicals, and it kind of makes sense, but I'm just like, well, it's an essential oil. It smells nice. I don't necessarily think about the fact that, like, if you get lemon oil on your skin and go out in the sunlight, you can get some seriously bad sunburn. It's outside of my brain power. They feel like a known entity, which is a risky way of thinking about it. I had to use a bain-marie because last time I tried to make some essential oily, buttery stuff in the microwave in a plastic container, it melted the plastic container. So I learned from my mistake there. And when you're making things in really small batches, it's really hard to get the precise ingredients. So you're supposed to have 6 grams of this, 5 grams of that. With the liquids, it's just really hard to get exactly that. I was trying to make like 1 bar. You have a much smaller margin of error. So the bar I ended up making was very, very soft. Not stupidly so, like it is usable, but quite a lot of it gets on your skin. It's kind of a little bit smushy. I probably had a few too many of the liquids or the softer things instead of the hard wax. And speaking of hard wax, instead of getting these lovely beeswax bars, I really, really wish I'd gotten beeswax pellets because it would have been a lot easier. It was quite hard to cut off. The smell of beeswax, by the way, I know that a lot of people use candelilla wax, but I quite like beeswax. It smells really good. But you could substitute that if you wanted to do a vegan one. I was also a bit worried about my mold. I just used like an old container from a wild deodorant that I'd used up, so it still smelled of jasmine and mandarin blossom, actually. I didn't say they stopped doing jasmine and mandarin blossom. That was another freaking nail. There's a lot of nails in this wild coffin. I used an old mold to pour it in. I was worried that it would go out the side, so I taped it all up. But it was actually fine. The consistency of it wasn't massively viscous. It was good enough to put in a container, but I wasn't worried at all about it going out the side. So in retrospect, I'd maybe not tape it up. It was fine. There wasn't any leakage. And the quantity I made was enough for one full one and, I don't know, maybe a third to a half of another one. So it's a good thing I had an extra in the background. And I was trying to make 50 grams of it, but of course, because of shrinkflation, it's 40 grams. Probably the weighing out. That's partly why I had the difference. Learning points. I said it's quite a buttery thing, and also because it's been really hot recently, that hasn't helped it. You're supposed to let it rest for maybe 5 days before you use it, but it's not the end of the world if you don't, better than being stanky. Thankfully, the experiment was a success, because otherwise I would be 70 quid down the drain. But next time, what I really need to do is probably put more wax in. I might over egg the wax, but I'm also going to make a bigger batch. That will mean that the little inconsistencies and accuracies are a bit better, because I was just using kitchen scales. That's to the closest gram if they've been calibrated, which they've never been calibrated to my knowledge, apart from at the factory, if they were even calibrated to the factory. I will say, because the shea butter I got was not deodorized, I think that was something I had lying around already that I just wanted to use up. So it smells quite pungent of the butters. I didn't want to spend an extra few quid getting deodorized shea butter or cocoa butter. It just didn't feel appropriate because I was already spending quite a lot of money on something. I was trying to do like long-term savings, but short-term it was definitely not a saving. Thankfully, it worked. It will probably be better with the ricinolia. I have noticed maybe a tiny bit of smell, but definitely less than if I do not deodorize, which doesn't normally happen, to be clear. We've had some very, very hot days, so I can attest to the fact that it's actually pretty decent, considering it's been pretty much working on the hot days. Maybe not lasting quite as long as wild, but I would say that perhaps the scent of wild deodorants are possibly masking it a little bit. I think maybe they have better longevity, and I think the ricinoliate may be affecting it, but it's a pretty good attempt. If I had fragrances in there, if I had deodorized butters, it would probably be even better. And if I'd put a bit more wax in to compensate for my ham-fisted liquids and butters. I came into this whole experiment going, oh, I'm going to make a silver tube, and then I'm going to totally recreate the wild container and everything. I might eventually, but that's going to cost quite a lot of money. It's like coming up to 100 quid, which feels not efficient, considering I have definitely not broken even with my deodorant making yet. So I need to get that up and running consistently, get the consistency parfait insofar as I can, and then I maybe, once I've broken even and some, then I can think about making a tube, because that's gonna be quite tricky unless I get like a really, really big tube and then squish it a bit, because while I've got soldering things, I'm not really good at it. Therefore, maybe getting a massive, slightly complicated hollow thing is not going to be very easy. And I might just chuck a load of money to it and make an absolute pig's ear of it. But that was my overall like, oh yeah, that would be really nice because I can have really like luxury deodorant. There's copper and stuff, but I think that it might leach chemicals. That's what we're trying to avoid. The other thing I just want to put a little pin in is the fact that when people put scent on a deodorant list, there isn't a lot of regulation around that. There have been a few things that concern me about that sort of thing and the link to cancers. It's the whole correlation does not equal causation, but because it is unregulated, and if the most dangerous thing is the scents, especially in this formulation, stacking up a little bit riskily. Thus far, and I am one batch down, I'm actually in need of making another batch. Thus far, I have turned my petty grievance into a big project, but you know what? This one's actually starting to pay off. So that's nice and positive. And it isn't actually too bad to make. You do have to sacrifice like a couple of bowls, silicone spatulas and stuff. And like not fully sacrifice them, but just like get all the wax off. It wasn't too bad. Nothing like soap cleaning up. That is quite something because you have to be super careful about the chemicals. This time I was just like, well, it's cooled down. It's basically deodorant. Just put it on my pits. It might be an activity if you wish to do it at the beginning of the day before you've deodorized. Next week, I will be delving into Apple Watch Ultra after 3.5 years. Is it still worth it? And then roughly this time next month, we're going to be doing something a little bit different, and I will be presenting to you Diaries of a Cave Person. Have a great one. See you next week. Bye.